Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Playeasy Warmup Podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Shields, and today we're diving into the world of baseball. Joining us is Brian Werner, the president of Prospect Wire and USA Premier Baseball, an organization that has been helping youth and high school baseball players get the exposure they need for over 20 years. Prospect Wire runs elite tournaments and showcases across the country using cutting-edge technology and data to connect players with college coaches and pro scouts. Unlike traditional scouting, their focus is on 98% of the athletes who may not have a clear path to the next level, but have the talent and work ethic to make it happen. I really enjoyed this conversation with Brian. It is clear the passion that he has for growing the sport of baseball and making events in general more accessible to baseball players of all levels across the country. It's always cool to meet with event organizers who are entrepreneurs. They're going through the path of building a business, and how I see it as what we do from Playeasy as a startup. So going through the trials and tribulations and just the overall roller coaster that is growing your business. He's very transparent about it hasn't all been, rainbows and butterflies, growing this into a prominent baseball organization that people trust. There's been a lot of bumps along the road, but has a lot of great perspective on just overcoming failure and the importance of building relationships and connection and always putting the participants and spectators and the event experience first. And so I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do as well. Thanks. This episode of the Playeasy Warmup Podcast is proudly sponsored by Sports Richmond, Virginia, where history meets adventure and sports thrive. Richmond isn't just a destination, it's an experience waiting to be discovered. The Richmond region, also known as RVA by the locals, blends hip with history and character with culture in a one-of-a-kind destination. Our region offers something for everyone, regardless of budget, interest, or age. Take advantage of all there is to see and do, and discover for yourself why the Richmond region was named #1 town to visit by CNN. If you're looking to take your next sports event or visit to the next level, make Richmond your destination. Learn more about what Richmond has to offer at sportsrichmondva.com. Thank you, Sports Richmond, Virginia, for supporting this episode and helping us share the stories that make sports and travel so impactful. Brian Werner, welcome to the Playeasy Warmup Podcast.
Thanks so much, Carrie, for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, Brian, can you start by telling us a bit about your background and how you got involved with Prospect Wire?
So I try to make a very long story short. So I joined Prospect Wire back in 2008. I had been working for the New York Yankees right out of college and everything. I started as an intern and got involved in pro scouting, amateur scouting, became the director of baseball operations, and kind of as my career kind of hit a kind of a wall there and everything, I had stepped away. Anyone that's worked in professional sports will tell you get a little burnt out because you realize it's very much a business. So I stepped away from baseball for a few years. Eventually got into some coaching just to kind of get back into the pure giving back to the game of baseball. And while I was doing that, a family friend of mine that I grew up, I played Little League for his father, both football and baseball, and he played for my parents growing up and everything. And I had saw that he was starting a company or had started a company up, and just reached out, was like, explained my background and what I had been doing, with scouting, and just, if he needed any help to let me know. And in October of 2008, he reached out and asked me to come out and work an event that was at the time called the All Florida Invitational, which is now kind of an offshoot of what's become our All American Games. But it was an event I worked. It was one of the most talented events we've probably still ever had in Prospect Wire history. Several guys, Nick Castellanos and Scooter Jeanette, were both high school guys back then at the time, and we had them. So I worked that event, and he had asked me to kind of stick around after I had written what amounted to about a novel worth of reports, because that's what I was used to through professional scouting. And he was like, "Hey, if we can figure out how to tone this down and make it short for people, we might have something." And so I started working with him, and we got into the tournament business at Prospect Wire in 2009. It had just been a showcase kind of once a year type thing. And in 2009, we ran our first tournament. In 2010, I ended up becoming the tournament director, along with being the scouting director for Prospect Wire. It was one of those out of necessity due to an emergency. I was asked to kind of take over doing the schedule in the middle of an event, and I luckily I had winged it and got through it. But in 2011, we built our schedule up and added, went from 1 or 2 summer events to 3 or 4. Added a second fall event, and then in 2012, after dealing with rain, we decided it was time to start looking for places we could go to that it didn't rain. So Arizona was the most logical destination. We ignored how hot it was out there, and we started working with Mesa, and at the time the Chicago Cubs were at the Fitch location. Now they're at Riverview, but that was our first venture outside of the state of Florida. So we ran a pretty successful event in Arizona, started to gain some momentum on the West Coast. And then in 2015, we were encouraged by some California teams to come out. No one was really doing anything set in the state of California because there were no complexes. So we went out, myself and the former ownership, Matt Beaumeisel and a couple other guys went out to San Diego and to Los Angeles and started looking at fields. We ended up doing some video scouting work, as we called it back then, which was the early days of doing social media video, which is now prevalent at everyone's tournament. But we started doing it for a company called USA Premier. They ran an event called the Firecracker Classic out in California, in Southern California, and it was our first opportunity to kind of see what it was like to run a tournament where we were only using individual locations because there were no complexes out there. So it was something we came back from going, if a husband and wife group who owned USA Premier at the time could do something like that, we're like, what could we do with a little bit more manpower? And we kind of reached out to a few teams out there, had to sacrifice our budget and everything, but got a good set of about 20 teams the first year in 2016 and ran a pretty successful event in Los Angeles. Decided in 2017 if we could do it in Los Angeles, why not San Diego? Because it's obviously, who doesn't want to run an event in San Diego? So we went down there and things kind of took off, going from 20 to 40 to 60 to 80 plus teams leading up into COVID. Unfortunately, COVID kind of struck us down in California and set us back out there. But leading up to COVID, our old owner, Matt Beaumeisel, had decided he wanted to go in some different directions. So he'd sold the company to a group out of the Orlando area called DS Sports, who was a group that owned Baseball Cloud, a ball tracking system called Yacker Tech, an analytic tracking system called Yacker Tech. And they were more of a tech company, but they had a few event companies under their belt, one of them being Russ Mat Baseball, which is the largest collegiate baseball kind of event in the country. It's all the Northeast and Canadian and Midwest teams that can't play in February and March because of obviously weather. They come to Florida and play their schedule out here. So that company purchased us, and when we came out of COVID and everything after 2019, 2020, that's kind of when I was boosted up from being just a tournament director and a vice president at the time to the president of the company. And we're not a big company, so we're all involved in everything. I always tell people I've worked the gate. I still go get lunches when I'm in events, but we sort of have always been kind of a family first, atmosphere. The customers, always the first, always the most biggest priority kind of thing. And we kind of try to differ ourselves in that way. Like I said, we were one of the first to get involved in doing social media videos for the players and trying to promote as many different kids as we possibly could. And through the years, as we've built up our events now, we're back to going full go in California, where we had 60 plus, 70 plus teams last year in San Diego, and our LA event is back over 60 plus teams. So we're trending back in the right direction. Post COVID out there, we've added events in Ogden, Utah. We have an event this year in Boise, Idaho for the first time. And we run individual showcases all around the country. We're starting a new series this year called our Campus Series, which will be centered around collegiate facilities around the country. So we're always trying to think of new ways that we can help bring exposure to what we call the 98% that need that platform. And that's kind of always been our motto, is there's 2% of those athletes in baseball that do not need any of the initial companies to help them promote themselves. They're going to be first round picks. They're going to D1 colleges. The other 98% need those JUCOs to see them. They need those D3 and the NIA schools, and they need to be seen by some of those. I don't want to ever say lower level, because collegiate baseball is always the same. I joke. I went to Clemson and we were 21-0 my freshman year. We got named number 1 in the country, and our first game after spring break, Furman beat us handily at home. And at the time, everyone was like, well, "Who the heck is Furman?" But it just goes to show that in baseball, it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. If you're facing someone that's a good pitcher or a good lineup on that given day, anybody can beat anybody. So we always try to make sure that we do whatever we can, whether it's bringing in 15, 20, 30 colleges to an event, just the colleges that our players, the players that attend our event need to be in front of, those kind of things. Whether it's live streaming our events, and then offering that to parents, various different forms and things that we try to do to help promote the players as best as we possibly can. And that's kind of been our vision as we've continued to grow going through. So
and you led me right into my next question was, you talk a lot about that 98% when you are communicating your brand. So what was the original vision for Prospect Wire, and how has it evolved over the past 20 years?
Oh, that's a great question. In the initial years, I think it was just meant to be a showcase company in South Florida. Matt had started it up with the idea of just trying to, run a showcase here, run a showcase there, and see what kind of market was out there beyond, the only couple companies that were out there at the time, the initial companies that were out there at the time. It was just, let's see what's out there kind of thing. And as we started to get into that and ran that successful event in 2008, and we saw that there was, tournaments were going on, but there wasn't a huge variety at the time. There wasn't several of the groups were not around that we see today. It was just born out of necessity. We can do, what they're doing, but let's do it instead of going after, rankings and trying to promote our events by saying, if you attend this event, you're going to be, rank this or that, and nothing against any company that uses that model. We just attacked it from a different perspective of, let's put the customer first. Let's put the customer experience first. Let's put the players first. Because people like Matt Beaumeisel, who was the founder of the company, people like myself, we weren't, your top end, but Matt played at Florida, I played at Clemson. We were both very fortunate to end up with D1 careers, but we were not the heavily recruited types. I didn't throw, the upper 90s, kind of fastballs and those kind of things. I had to go out and promote at the time through videos that my mom took in the backyard or going to camps, and Matt had to do the same thing. We had to send emails and physical letters back then at the time, so we didn't have the access that a lot of the kids do today. But we believed that that because we had to work so hard to do things like that, we kept trying to think, what can we do to make that process easier for the kids today? As technology kept building, we always kept our head, our minds on the forefront of what was coming next, what was going to be that next process. So it's that 98% included people like Matt, the founder, myself, and many of the people that have worked for us at Prospect Wire have been those type of people.
And once again, leads me to my next question is that why that mission is so important to you? And Matt being a former player that maybe didn't have a direct path to the pros and being included within that 98% of kids, just making the sport more accessible with more opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always, as I've matured through, I say mature through my career, instead of saying I've been around too long, but as I've matured through my career, I've gotten to the point where in the beginning it was, we have to make a name for ourselves. And now that our brand is a little bit more recognizable, if you go to one of the conferences, obviously you're going to see me there, and everything. People know who Prospect Wire is. And I'm not saying we're at some of the other top initial companies, but at least if people see the logo, they see the colors, they recognize the brand. And for someone like us, doing it as hard as we've worked while still staying somewhat small as an operation, I think that's where just the pride in that brand, and getting it out there to everybody, and trying to bring that experience to so many different places that maybe don't have that baseball going on and everything. And I know that sounds like, oh, where can we go to, make more money? But we've always kind of sort of kept it with that idea of you can play a tournament anywhere. Any one of us can run a tournament, and every tournament's guts are the same thing. You show up, you play your 3 or 4 games, and you go. For us, it was more about, okay, let's make this experience worthwhile so that people continue to keep coming back. It's not we have to play at that tournament. It's we want to play with those guys, and we've done that through the personal, kind of the personal relationships. We're the guys that went to dinner with many coaches back in the day to get them to come to our events. We sat down and went to these people, to these people's towns and invited them out and sat with them at bars and had drinks with them at night, and just listened to what they had to say about the state of travel baseball. And along the way, we have continued to do that. I always strive, to tell my staff and just that the customer is always first, no matter what happens. Our coaches, our players, our parents, we're nothing without them. And we always need to kind of keep that in mind, no matter how much it might not be the case. That's how we need to continue to treat it. And that's why we think that's why people keep coming back. So
that's awesome. And I know you said just even since COVID time, you guys have continued to expand across the country. What do you look for out of a host destination?
In the past, it used to be I avoided rain at all costs, and that's where we wanted to go. And once I got into sort of making the decisions on where events would go, and I don't ever do it by myself. I always make sure that our staff is in on the decisions. If we try to go to a new place, I run it by them first and present them with with the options. But in the beginning, it was we stuck to what we knew, which was Arizona. We knew Florida. We knew California. Oddly enough, late in my career, I got involved in sort of, as we call it, the conference tour. I had only been going to places like ABCA, and occasionally, we'd go to teams and those kind of things. Those were the only 2 conferences I really knew about. And then once I became president of Prospect Wire, I started getting introduced to things like Connect and Sports ETA and Sports Relationship and Sports Express, and started realizing that these were places that instead of having to start looking in Google searching all around the country for who might have fields, I used to spend so much time on Google Earth just going, what fields are there in Minnesota? I realized that I could go to these shows and everything and go, oh my God, I can meet with all these different destinations and see what their presentations were and let them kind of present their cities to me. So as we started to do that, I started looking at places where, a lot of times our competitors are not home based at, so there's certain competitors that have the Midwest area. There's certain that have the Southeast and that join us obviously in Florida. There's certain that do the West Coast. And we always try to, as we say, play nicely with everybody. We're not looking to make enemies with any one particular group by making it seem like we're encroaching on their business. So we look for pockets and places where maybe there's not as many tournaments going around, and then from there just it's about the experience and the relationships. As my career has matured, I think that's one of the most important things to me is the relationship of the people that we're working with worthwhile. Is it someplace I would want to take if I was a coach? Would I want to take my team there? And have an experience there? Is it the kind of town where if I'm leaving and I'm going to go stay in a hotel, is there something to do there? So we always look for those kind of things because the local teams they're going to stick around and do whatever they do once the games are over with. But if you have 20 or 30 or 40 teams that are not from the area, then you want to make sure they're taking advantage of whatever that destination has. And through those relationships I've been able to kind of forge, it's being able to do things with people like yourself that help promote those destinations, restaurants and shops and places. Obviously here in Florida we have entertainment destinations like Disney World and places like that. So we look for more than just obviously we want great facilities. We want the best baseball fields we can provide all of our people and everything. But I would say at the end of the day it's the experience of where they're going for that event. Is it worthwhile? And those are kind of the most important things to me now is when we're looking to play new events.
Yeah, that's great. I think if there's anything that we've learned being in this industry, it's all about the relationships and it's all about how to provide best experience for those participants and spectators coming to your events. And so do you have an example of a destination or two that you've had a successful partnership with that you've been able to grow your events in their city?
So I always want to say, because our events in California have done so well, but unfortunately I didn't learn about the help that people like Sports San Diego and Hallie and her group, can do out there, or what Destination Irvine can do for us. We kind of built our stuff from the ground up using things like Facilitron out there. But as I've kind of gotten over the last few years, as I've gotten into the meeting of the different CVBs, unfortunately, she's no longer in Ogden and everything, but Millie Osgothorpe, who's now with the Florida Sports Foundation, was actually one of the first meetings that I had at Connect in Las Vegas a few years back. And it was the first time that I connected with someone on a one-on-one basis and fell in love with the destination because of the way she presented it. It was the first time that I had been invited by someone to go to an actual site visit, and fell in love with the town because it gave me an opportunity to sit with someone that was from the town, that was born and raised there, that obviously cares, tremendously about their facilities. And even though she is gone now, her, the young, I shouldn't say the young woman who took over with her, Stephanie Solomon, and everything, she's done a fantastic job, taking over and making it kind of her brand. And she's from the area as well, or has lived there for at least the last 15, 20 years. And you can tell when you're dealing with that destination that it's more than just, these are our baseball fields and this is what we can do with you. These are our restaurants. This is on Friday nights. This is what we can do, with our we close down the streets and we have a kind of a First Friday kind of thing. Those kind of opportunities where it's more than just, I'm showing up and I'm playing baseball. It's let me show off our town. So they do an absolutely phenomenal job. I should say the entire Rocky Mountain group, Zoram and his group, Abby and Aaron Miller and Davis, that entire group is so passionate about highlighting their destinations that it's almost made like the Rocky Mountains in Utah, especially a home away from home. I look forward to going there every year now. But it's not even the ones that we do business with. For example, Bree Seifert, who's in Fort Collins, one of the most passionate, hardworking people I've ever met in the industry, and she knows that they don't have the facilities to help us. She knows there's other groups that there's biases for, but she still keeps trying, and she stays in touch with me on a regular basis. Amanda Morgan and her group in Charlotte do a fantastic job of being loyal to. And I use them as an example because we ran an event there that failed. We weren't able to get the signups there. Teams were used to playing in other events, and unfortunately, there were other events that surrounded the date we had that just made it, impossible for us to kind of get the teams we needed. But we still continue to have conversations about potentially doing something in the future. And it's groups like that make you understand that it's about the relationship. And if it doesn't work today, then maybe it's going to work next year, or maybe it's 3 or 4 years down the road, or maybe it's in Stephanie's case, she's following someone else, she's in someone else's footsteps and trying to make it her own type of event. To me, those are the best types of destinations, the ones that don't make it about how much money are you making us and how much money are we making from from you, and what can you give me, in terms of grant money and those kind of things. I always tell people I've never asked a destination for anything in my entire life. If it's offered, let's talk about it. If you put it out there, we'll talk about it. But I want to prove to you that I can run a good event in your town before I'm worried about asking you what you can give me. So those are the things I think that make the best partnerships, the best relationships, is when it's almost becomes a friendship. It's someone you look forward to talking to, even when you're not going to be running an event with them and everything. No matter how many times you meet with them, you still enjoy sitting down and having that 8 to 10 minute conversation that we get to have. So,
yeah, and I think that's all of those names I know those names, and so all great cities and destinations and people to work with. And I think for anyone new to the industry that's trying to understand, how do you break into some of these. You're an established brand of baseball, and someone wanting to have a conversation with you, but not knowing if they have the facilities or the size or the scope to be able to make that event successful. What are some of the bare minimum logistics that you need for one of your showcases or tournaments to just start that conversation?
Which is a great question, because it's always the first thing that people sit down when they don't think they have the facilities to host somebody, host a baseball tournament company, because maybe some of the other companies that they've met with have certain needs, and we all do things differently. I always tell them I don't need a complex. A complex is a wonderful thing. We all would love to have 3, 4, 5. I have multiple complexes that we have access to here in Florida that we use. It's wonderful, but it doesn't make or break a tournament. I've always said, and I'm not doing this saying this to pick on any particular person or group. If you're not willing, if you say you can't run a tournament because you need 15 individual fields, you're just being a little bit lazy. Not saying just because we've done it, we're nobody, and we've run events in California using 15 different fields, using 16, 17 fields one year in San Diego, spread out between 30 to 40 miles of space. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of extra planning. But at the end of the day, it just depends on the location you're at. If I know I'm going into California, I know going in, there's no complexes out there. So I have to do that the hard way. And we start very early. And when it comes to the bare minimums, we look at, just things like, is it a quality high school field? Would most majority high school teams be okay playing there? Because one thing we don't ever want as a parent or coach to be complaining, the fence was too short, and that's why we lost the tournament. And I'm going to go back and talk about that on social media, that the fields were not up to par. So we work very hard when we know we don't have complexes to make sure that we have collegiate fields, if we can get them, higher end high school fields, academies, those kind of things. Because if we're going to ask for top dollar, because we need that obviously to pay for things in certain areas, then we at the same time want to make sure that if you're coming to our event, okay, we might have paid a little bit more than a local tournament, but we're at least playing at Point Loma, Nazarene, which is right on the Pacific Ocean, or we're playing it, in front of college coaches at UC Riverside, or we're playing it at Mesa Community College in Arizona, wherever it might be. So it just depends on where we're going. But I always look at the destination and basically let them present what they have. And if they gravitate towards, I don't have the complexes, we'll get into the conversation of, but you have high school fields, you have collegiate fields. And if they say, well, we only have a couple high school fields and they really don't like working with tournaments, okay, well, we run a campus series, so tell me what collegiate fields you have. So there's always a pivot in that conversation that we can head towards. And even if it's just a showcase, which only takes one field. We have portable technology like Yakkertech that we can take with us to a showcase to make a simple, to make a high school stadium all of a sudden look like it's a more presentable option. So it really just depends on the destination and the facilities they have to offer. And at the end of the day, like I said, I always keep in my mind, if I was a coach, would I want to bring, my team there? If I was a family, would I want to be part of a team that was going to play an event there?
Yeah, that's great. And you guys recently announced in 2024 your biggest expansion yet, with new events in Utah, Texas, Michigan, and more. What has fueled that growth, and what challenges have come with it?
I think the fuel from it comes from we have run so many events in the state of Florida, and we now, with the purchase of USA Premier, one of our sister companies, we have 8 to 10 events now in Southern California, plus our San Diego event, plus the events we had originally ourselves. It just was one of those, we start to look for where can we go that we feel pretty confident that we can bring something new or something different to the area, someplace that's not already saturated with something that's very similar to what we do. So that's kind of how the process starts as we're looking into those things. And then there's only so many events we can run in Florida. If our destinations reach out and tell us, hey, we've got an open date, which Polk County does, quite often, they'll reach out and say, hey, we have an open date. What do you guys think you can do? And because we have success, we use that historical data that we've had in the past to go, okay, we sell out most of our events in Polk County. We probably it doesn't matter what time of year it is. We probably can run an event there. But we always are cognizant of who else is running something in that area, that time of year. And there's just certain things going on where it's like, okay, we might want to try to push it because it's a new area, but at the same time, we do fail. There's new events that don't get off the ground, unfortunately. And that doesn't mean we give up on the area. It just means we repivot and look and say, okay, maybe there's a different style of event that we can bring to that new location.
Yeah. And that's interesting. So how do you think that your relationships, you've talked about a few events that maybe haven't performed as well as you might have thought. How have those relationships been important in navigating some of those, I wouldn't even say failures if you're learning from them, but challenges that have come with the expansion?
One thing I've preached throughout my entire career doing this, it was something I learned when I was with the Yankees, and their mentality was when you're on top and you're doing really, really well, that's kind of sort of when you need to keep going. What do I need to do to stay on top, to be better? When you have failures, they're usually very obvious what those failures are. You don't need to be reminded that you failed, and because you're going to work hard. It's in my particular case, the way that I treat relationships is if I don't do well, some people out there, you can ask Amanda and her group in Charlotte, I take it very hard. I take it personally that I didn't live up to my side of that agreement and everything. So I look at it internally as a failure on my part, but I also feel like those failures teach me more about what we can do next time versus the successes. You sort of get to the point where, okay, this event keeps selling out year after year. There's not much I need to do about it. And then all of a sudden that's when, something else, pops up and you don't realize it and your event starts to, kind of trend backwards. And unfortunately, sometimes it's too late to do something about it because you weren't paying attention or staying on top of it. But I think it's the failures teach you where to look for the obstacles. I shouldn't say avoid them because they can continue to keep coming back, but they at least teach you this is where it's probably going to come from. So this is how I attacked it the last time. Let me see if I can go about it a different way. And that's how some of our new events get, like the campus series gets brought out or Prospect Wire Youth, which we're working on, which might be a different way to get into a city where maybe we don't have success at the 13 to 18U level, but maybe we can at the 10 to 12 because there are field options for us at that level. So it's ebbs and flows, but we do the best we can to just kind of navigate that roller coaster that is this industry.
I feel that deeply, even though we are on different sides of it. It's all about navigating that roller coaster of ups and downs, and the relationships are just as important, and maintaining and keeping those. And so what has been the most surprising or rewarding part of growing Prospect Wire into what it is today?
In the beginning, as the tournament director, I kept my head down. We used to always have myself and Matt used to always have kind of a saying that I live life in the present, and he always lived life in the future because he was thinking of what was going to be coming next down the pike. And I never wanted to get involved in that future stuff because I knew that as soon as one event was over, I was rolling into the next one. So I could not afford to keep my head looking forward. Since I've stepped out of that role, I have an absolutely fantastic team. We have two amazing vice presidents. Our national director, Nick Susi, does an amazing job navigating way more events than I ever did. And luckily we have a good system with Playbook 365 that helps us navigate that. But the excitement that has come from when you do, when you're trying to grow events for the first time on your own, all the events that I had when Matt sold the company were events that for the most part, he had helped, kind of create, or at least was a portion of it. We all were a team, but it was his vision of where he wanted to go with events. And when I first took over, doing things as the vice president, and even as I started doing things as the president, it was, well, we have events in Florida, so it's easy to pop another event up in Florida. And I never looked at that as something that I created. It was just, we're already here. Our brand is known. So when that event in Ogden transpired and we got it off the ground, and it was the first event that I had personally, I shouldn't say, I never want to say, I don't want to make it sound like it was my event by myself. as the president of Prospect Wire, it was the first event that it was my idea to go, hey, let's take an event to the state of Utah, talk with our group, and we saw how beautiful it was out there. And the pride of watching something go from the very, very beginning stages of a conversation, an 8-minute conversation between two people sitting at a table at a conference of 60 meetings that I had during the course of that show, to watch it go from that to the site visit, to the seeing the fields, to meeting the people out there, and to where it's come today, to where those people are now I consider family. That has been the kind of the coolest part of transitioning into this part of my career and everything, is just the seeing the fruit of the labor, so to speak, come to fruition. And when that event does actually become successful and it becomes part of your regular schedule, it's there's a lot of pride in seeing that and knowing, hey, you know what, I knew what that was like from day one until today, and it's almost like, I'm not a parent myself, so I guess that's the closest thing that I understand what it's like to raise a child, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think it's cool. I mean, it's clear to just having this conversation with you, and I know we've met in person, it's clear to see your passion for what you do and growing your business. And I think it's really refreshing for someone, trying to grow their sport and making it more accessible to people all across the country. And so since we started Playeasy, you've been one of our power users. Why has it been important? How has technology helped grow your brand, and why is it so important to utilize, innovation and technology for the growth of your organization?
Great question. When we first started doing this, and back in 2008, 2009, when we got into the tournament side of things, it was, we had a developer that was in the Ukraine that helped us build our website. Matt learned how to build a website, using what, the tools and technology that we had. There wasn't a lot of, camera phones were not as prevalent as they are today. Those things, and I don't want it to sound like back in the day, those kind of things, but when we first started doing this, it was a lot of by hand. All of our schedules were done through Google Docs. Our 80 plus team event in California, in Los Angeles, with 15 fields, was done through Google Docs. Up late nights doing those kind of things. So as technology is kind of built, and there's groups, like our operating system at Playbook, it's simplified. Obviously, it's made things, allowed us to start running more events because we can process schedules much faster, because we can process payments. It can, we automate things like the payment system. We can have automated notifications that go out reminding teams about rosters and those kind of things. And because other groups use the same operating system, it becomes familiar and everything. So as technology has evolved and more people are using that technology, it just makes life easier, obviously, for the operators, allows us to expand the business. And, I very fortunate to be kind of in that group that was, born just, ahead of when the internet kind of really took off, and it was the days of AOL and those kind of things. And now as Facebook has progressed into Instagram and TikTok, and you have, all these different apps that we get to use to promote our brand, we realize that it's impossible to be in 50 different locations all at the same time and cover all those states. And the only way that people in the Northeast are going to know who Prospect Wire is if we start posting those things to social media. And we've worked very hard to grow that brand. 50,000+ followers on our Twitter accounts and our Instagram accounts, and I sadly can admit this as a late 40s-year-old man. During COVID, I learned TikTok because we saw that was a direction the kids were going in, and we understood that. The famous, the thought of, as I get older, the group that I'm dealing with stays the same age. So we started having to adjust to that, going, well, today's parent is no longer, that late 40s parent. Today's parent is the, late 20s, early 30s parent. And what do those parents do? They spend their time on I watch our staff, they spend their time on social media all the time. So that's how we started taking advantage of ways to market our brand by going, all right, we're going to continuously keep posting stories that have our logos and have our color schemes, and attending those conferences and now everything, and being able to do things like this with people like you guys at Playeasy, it just allows us to cover places that we're never going to, I don't have the ability to just get on, to hop on a plane and go hang out in the Pacific Northwest for 2 weeks and go field to field and location to location. I need people like you guys to be able to post things, so that we can check those, those things like you guys have the heat map and let us know who's been paying attention to our events. And, oh, look, I go on there in the last 30 days, the Montana and Idaho, and we're seeing, that progress pick up there. It lets us know, okay, this is doing something, and we can start to address how we need to be able to utilize, you guys and others to market ourselves. So.
That's awesome. And so as we look forward to 2025, what are you most looking forward to this year?
It's after, I always say last year was our best year. We topped our best spring by over 100 teams. We had our best summer since 2018. We had our best fall ever by 200 plus teams. We are having currently our best spring by over 100 teams again. So to me, I look forward to seeing the continued success. I want to. There's a few events that have been kind of taking on water and going in the wrong direction, and it's been my focus, to kind of put my attention into those events and everything, and see what we can do to repair the relationship that we have with that destination and make it better, so that teams want to come back to those places, and just kind of keeping my eye on where might be the next thing. We're excited about this new campus series that we're putting together. It allows us to go to new places. We're running our very first event in Pennsylvania coming up this July at DeSales University. So that's our first campus series event. We're having some conversations in some other places like Ohio with some colleges and everything. We're having some initial conversations with some schools out in the Rocky Mountains. So for me, that's a new, that's kind of a new path and a new avenue. So we're excited about that. And while we have not officially announced it on social media, so the kids don't know it, I feel like we can probably safely do it here. We have been very fortunate to host our All-American games for the last however many years it's been, since I think 2016. It's been at Vanderbilt. And hosting it in Nashville, with the exception of during COVID, we had to shift it due to their restrictions. We held it 1 year at TCU, and 1 year it was at we ran it in California and Florida at the same time on two different coasts. But this year we are taking the event to Texas.
Nice.
We always try to look for a place that is accessible for all of our kids around the country. And one of the airports that we all know you can fly directly to from just about everywhere is Austin. So I guess this is the official announcement that Prospect Wire's All-American event is going to the University of Texas this August. So.
Amazing. Breaking news.
Breaking news. You heard it. There's only like 2 other people outside of my staff that know that.
Well, no, that's awesome. And I am looking forward to seeing the success of another one of your events. And so just to close us out, probably the toughest question, what has been the biggest lesson you've learned in growing this organization?
Don't be afraid to fail. The idea that if you do fail in an event, that it's the end of that relationship. As I said, there's destinations that prove that's not the case. But don't be afraid to take chances. Always make sure that if you're in a situation like I'm in, where you're leadership of a company, make sure you're always keeping your staff, your group informed, making sure that they're part of that decision, that it's not just a decision you want to do for selfish reasons, that the group that you have that's actually on the ground physically making you look good, which I commend our staff tremendously. I can't do what I do without them, and they're the reason that our brand is successful as it is. But always making sure that they're part of that decision, whether it's the people that are just keeping score and working our gate, making sure they understand that they're part of that process, that they're the first people that our parents see, that our customers see when they walk through that gate all the time, is that smiling face that's welcoming them to our events. So kind of the biggest challenge is year to year, making sure that it's genuine. A lot of people, we can tell if you've been around long enough, if you're old enough, you can kind of see through the fake and everything. So it's making sure that people understand it's genuine, and by constantly keeping in touch, as I said, with all of our destinations, whether I work with them or not, just reminding them that I'm grateful for everything they do for us, for people like you guys, for people like our operating guys at Playbook, and the gazillion different destinations that we use around the country, and the ones we hope to do business with. It's always important to make sure you remind them that they're doing a good job even when things don't work out. And at the same time, like I said, when you're not afraid to fail, it keeps motivating you to see what else you can, how much further can you go, and what can we do? And it's been a cool thing. Like I said, Prospect Wire is not a gazillion-dollar company that's we're all sitting back on our yachts and everything. We're the as someone once said back in our early days, we're the good guys. And it's we've always tried to keep that in mind, that wherever we go, I said we're that group that's going to support everybody, and I think that's been the biggest challenge, is making sure year to year that you stay motivated, you stay hungry, but you're always not afraid to take those chances.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Brian, it's been such a pleasure getting to talk to you more in depth. And as I said, it's clear to see your passion for what you do. And it's always nice to be around people with that kind of energy. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Carrie, to all you guys, to everybody, to Ryan, the entire group there. You guys have been amazing. We appreciate everything you do for people like us and all the other sports out there that use you guys, and the destinations that take advantage of you. You make our jobs a lot easier than they used to be.
Awesome. That's what we aspire to do. So happy to hear that. But thanks so much. Until next time. Bye, everyone.